Hey, welcome. Calling this meeting to order of the Assembly's Budget and Finance Committee, where we put the fun in finance. We're going to start with Assembly member introductions.
Zach Johnson. Jared Gerker.
Yara Silvers.
I'm Daniel Volant. On the phone, I believe we have Mr. Constant.
Here.
Mr. Perez Verdia.
Here.
Mr. Martinez.
Present.
Are there any other Assembly members on the phone? I'm not hearing any.
Daniel, I'm here. Erin Baldwin Day.
Oh, and Ms. Baldwin Day. Okay, fantastic. With that, we're going to move on in. Actually, let's hear some introductions from members of the administration who are joining us.
Ona Browse, Director of the Office of Management and Budget.
Fantastic.
Alex Slivka, I'm Chair of the MOA Trust Board.
Okay, moving on in the agenda, our standing reports. First, we're going to hear from the Chair of the Budget Advisory Commission, if they are in the room or online.
This is Ian Mills. I'm on the phone.
Wonderful, Ian. Okay, take it away.
Hey, thank you. We had a great meeting this month. We went over the budget to actuals for Q1 and reviewed the progress of the annual audit. Very informative. We appreciate the presentations from all folks. We began the election for a new vice chair, but the principal nominee was not in the room, so we elected to postpone that to next month's meeting. We're looking forward to the rest of the year. We sort of set a informal schedule for the rest of our meetings. I want to thank Amanda Mosier for helping put that together. Sorry, I'm walking. I just got back into Anchorage in the airport. I think that's basically all I have. I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions for the Chair of the Budget Advisory Commission? I'm not seeing any questions for you at this time, Ian. Thank you. Your efforts are greatly appreciated.
Thank you very much.
Okay, next we will hear our MOA Trust Fund update.
Through the chair, Alex Slivka. So the trust board has been busy. We've met a couple of times. We are in the middle of an RFP process where we have worked with MOA staff in purchasing. Our investment consultant contract expires at the end of this year and cannot be renewed. So we are in the final throes of selecting a consultant to carry on after that. We submitted, and you would have received on the Tuesday meeting, AIM on the work of the trust board for 2024. And as well, you approved our budget for this year at that meeting. Thank you very much. The final thing that I would share is that the approved director of investment operations, we're working with CFO Philippe on that position description, and we are hopeful to have a person hired and in that position, hopefully by September or October. I will stop there and see what questions you have.
Assembly member questions. Any questions on the phone? Feel free to text me if you'd like to get in the queue. Gone. All right. Thank you very much for that update. Next, we'll hear from the Office of Management and Budget. Ms. Browse.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are entering our budget season. I feel like every time I am in front of you, I say that because it happens twice a year for 4 months, 6 months at a time. But we have started our process with the departments, and there is a calendar that you have distributed today. This is about a page and a half of dates, and this is the annual OMB budget calendar process. Starts in March with the community council surveys for capital projects. And then we run through all of the activities that the municipality, the assembly, and the public go through from March all the way through the end of the budget process. The assembly comes into play mostly at the 120-day memo date, about 2/3 of the way down the front page, August 29th. That's when the mayor delivers the initial sort of forecast and preview of what the upcoming budget will look like. And then when you turn it over to the second page, this is the official sort of public assembly process that starts on October 1st, when we deliver the mayor's proposed budget, and then go through the formal introduction at the assembly meeting, the work sessions, the public hearings, the amendment process, and then final vote in November. So we're starting right now in the middle of June, and you'll see on page 1, about 6 lines down, 7 lines down, we distribute the guidance to the departments to say, this is what we expect the upcoming year to look like. We, give them the forms that they fill out to give us their budget changes and requests. We compile all those department requests, review them. OMB has individual meetings with the departments. Then we have group meetings with the mayor and the executive teams and the departments, and go through and have the conversation about what changes need to be made, if there is any funding available for increases or adjustments, and what those may look like before we prepare to submit to the assembly.
Okay, I have a question from Member Baldwin Day.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Buss, I'm curious to know, for those of us who are freshman members and might want to come to the budget process, having done some homework, what would you suggest, or what steps would you suggest that we take to be ready to engage that process in a really thoughtful and robust way?
Well, through the chair to Member Baldwin Day, I heard about every third word in that. So I think, tell me if this is right, what you were asking is for new members or members of the public, how they would engage in this process. Is that right? Or is it for assembly members directly?
I will text the chair my question, and maybe he can ask it on my behalf.
Oh, okay.
Yep, that works. I can do that.
Oh, how many works?
Before Ona resumes, I'll just say a little bit later in the agenda, we're going to talk about sort of our upcoming work on our budget priorities and how we're going to correspond with the administration on that. And we would do that in advance of the 120-day memo, so that there can be a little bit of early back and forth between the assembly and the administration, and hopefully getting alignment on some priorities.
Yes, and as the chair said, I think one of the agenda items later will talk about how the communications and the resolutions go back and forth in order to inform the process directly from the assembly to the administration, et cetera.
So sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
Ms. Baldwin Day, her question is, what steps should freshman members take to prepare well to engage in the budget process?
And through the chair to Member Baldwin Day, I think Member Baldwin Day and I had a meeting for a few hours last week, and that was a really good, I think, introduction to being able to speak frankly and directly about what this process looks like and how we engage on amendments, and particularly if assembly members want the mayor to consider any adjustments within the budget in advance, I would suggest that you let both OMB know what you are thinking, but also to set up time to meet with the mayor's office and talk to them about what you would like to see. I think it helps deliver the intent early enough that it can be part of the thought process while we're moving through the budget drafting. There are some other background documents that I can present to the membership or give to Mr. Farina to distribute to the members that would give historical information on what our budgets have looked like over the last 20 years. And you can look at the departmental changes and see if there's any specific room or motivation for any amendments that you might want to engage in or see changed within the budget. I think that there are a lot of disparate pieces of information that inform how this budget works. And I think the best way to go about it, particularly as a freshman, is to identify what you are interested in. And then let's talk about how those pieces and parts interact with each other within the budget, because it's not as simple as identifying one thing. Usually there's a layer of stuff underneath it that all interacts with each other that can also need to be adjusted when you want to make some changes to it. So I think thinking directly about the changes that you want to see and contemplating them well in advance of seeing the budget presented to you is a good way to start.
Great. And I would just add to really rely on the help of Mr. Farina as well, because he is great at communicating with OMB and the other parties, our priorities and kind of what we're thinking. And as we move further along into the process, we will be having a work session on Friday, July 25th, on sort of budget basics. And that's when we'll be having our preliminary discussion on our assembly priorities too. So more info to come. Oh, no, did you want to
That's it.
continue? Okay, good.
Yep.
Great. Any other questions for Ms. Browse at this point? Okay. Next topic on our agenda is the budget to actuals, 2024 budget to actuals.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You have the packets, I believe, in front of you. We can, let's see if I can present this to the room. Hey. I can't. Yeah, forget it. Everybody has paper. Can deal with it. There you go. Thank you. On the first page, this is the general government budget to actuals through June 30th of 2025. You'll notice up at the top, it says that it is 51.5% through the fiscal year. So that's the percentage that we want to compare everything to as far as over and underspend. The departmental spends are listed. You'll see all the way out to the right, the percent spent. And at the bottom, the overall total spend for general government through June 30th is 45%. So that's about a 6% under budget spend for the first half of the year. Some of these departments, if you look into their individual percentages, we have one department that's running at 56, one at 59, but many of them are in the 40s. And the next page that breaks out labor and non-labor shows you a slightly more detailed breakdown of how those spends go within the department. So on the left-hand side, the labor spend is at 47% of 51%. And the non-labor spend is at 43% of 51%. So you saw at the beginning of the year, the labor non-labor comparison showed a much higher spend in the non-labor side compared to the amount of time that we had gone through in the year. And that starts to balance out because all of the funding and contracts are encumbered at the beginning of the year. And so as we spend more time throughout the year, that sort of catches up with itself. Any questions on those first two pages? Okay.
Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. So I see for the labor that we're the average is 47%, and almost everybody's a little bit under.
Mhm.
Is that I mean, for these that are kind of close to 50 but not there, does that reflect vacancies, or is it just lag because we're missing one paycheck in these numbers? Or can you explain a little bit?
Through the chair to member Johnson, it's a little of both, and it depends on the department. Some of these departments, consist of one or two people, and so if there is any vacancy for any period of time throughout the year, you're going to see a greater decrease in that spend, and quite a few of the most underspent departments are small, like the Equal Rights Commission, the real estate department, I believe, is 3 people. So I think that those departments, when there's any vacancies, you'll see quite a big dip. The good news about this, depending on how you look at this, is that these numbers over the last few years were much lower because the vacancy factor was so high. So we are returning to a pretty normal filled personnel seats, and that's great. You'll see on the next page, which shows the overtime breakdown. The overtime breakdown is a little gnarly, as it usually is. But when you look at the breakdown here and the sort of significant overages in the overtime department, you'll see that they are either in the public safety departments or within the departments that have really large vacancy factors. So, APD's overtime rate is significantly due to their missing officer PCNs, their filled positions. We have overages in fire, and that has to do with some of the way the operations work and the way the budget is structured there. The maintenance and operations department, you see a little bit of an overage there. That has to do with some vacancies. Parks and Rec also, their seasonal positions are sometimes hard to fill and are still challenging to fill, so there's overages there. But for the most part, we are getting back to sort of normal operations in terms of staffing.
Go ahead, Member Johnson.
Yeah, thanks. So looking at police and fire, as you point out here in the overtime, they are exceeding what was, I guess, budgeted, forecasted for those. But if I go back to the previous page in terms of overall spending, these numbers do reflect that overtime, right? So is it fair to say that, yes, we're spending more in overtime, but we're kind of filling that hole because we're not spending it on salaries?
Through the chair to Member Johnson, yes. The labor bucket of funding is held over here, and so it's all together in one. So if we have these vacancies that are not spending their personnel, their payroll checks, then the overtime is growing here, but it's still drawing from the same bucket of funding.
Right. And so I guess kind of looking ahead for the rest of the year for police and fire being two of our biggest and most important departments, the overall labor spend for those, we think for 2025 is going to come in about where we what we budgeted for. Yeah.
Through the chair to Member Johnson, yes. We're watching both of those departments and any of the other departments with high overtime very closely to see exactly how that breaks out, to determine what is, significantly attributable to vacancies, but what might need to be adjusted within the budget in order to true up to actual operations. Okay. I usually skip over the travel page because it's not that interesting. It is $275,000 total for the entire general government municipality, and we are 50% spent on it, so that's pretty even. The next is the alcohol tax, and these categories are sort of a mishmash of things that are grants and go out immediately all in one lump sum versus payroll or operational staffing that takes the whole year. But you'll see that quite a few of these programs have already been drawn down and are out in the community doing the work that they are supposed to be doing. We have a couple of internal operational categories that are still being billed against and will transition throughout the rest of the year to being spent more as they're getting out of their general government spending and into the alcohol tax. But for the most part, this is going well based on the last few years of how this fund has moved out the door, I think is the way to phrase that. And the next
I'm
page.
sorry,
Go
on
ahead.
that page, can I jump in and ask a question?
Go ahead.
Thanks. So looking at MCT 24/7 operations, now as I recall, well, I guess I'll ask, it's here in the alcohol budget, right? And shown we've barely spent anything, but that's because we're actually paying for that through general government, correct?
And through the chair to Member Johnson, it's funded on both sides. So the bulk of the MCT was funded through the alcohol tax for a number of years, and that was before it was 24/7 operations. We moved that funding into the general government cycle, increased the funding here in the alcohol tax specifically to go to 24/7. So they are billing general government and then billing the alcohol tax portion once that funding is out, if that makes sense.
Okay, so I guess then this does kind of look right. And the fact
Yes.
that we've only spent a little bit is because the latter part of the year is what's going to come out of alcohol.
Yes,
All right.
correct.
Thank you.
Ideally, when we are, in a separate fund like this fund can come as a secondary support and is retained within the fund if there is any lapse fund.
Oh, and I'm looking at a couple of the homelessness related items. So the Next Step Initiative and the In Our Backyard. I think there was one other, and it looks like there's 0% spent. Can you kind of?
So
Explain why.
there were 3 items. I believe it was the In Our Backyard, the Next Step pilot, and I can't remember what the other one was, that were rolled over from 2024 because the programs had not been able to spend their 2024 allocation all in the fiscal year. So they were held over and then continued in 2025. I think that you just appropriated this In Our Backyard. That's coming up. And so that will change to being spent. And the 294 for the Next Step pilot, I can check with the health department to see what the status of that is. But those are 24 continuation programs. And so it could be that accounting just hasn't caught up yet.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions at this point? All right, go ahead and continue.
So the next page is the marijuana tax, or the ACE fund. And this is the first year that the ACE fund has existed as the Early Education and Child Care Fund, and operationally put money through the budget. And you'll see again that many of these categories are have been awarded and have moved out the door to their specific grantees. And it seems to be moving pretty well in terms of where we are in the year and how it's getting out the door. But if there are any specific questions on these items. Okay. The next pages are all the utilities and enterprises, and we don't usually go over those here. If there are questions on them, I'm more than happy to discuss them with you, or I believe you have a committee meeting next that also could involve people who might answer those questions. Any other questions? Okay.
I'm not seeing any. All right. Okay, so we'll move on in our agenda. And next we'll hear about the BSSA, the Building Safety Service Area.
To the chair, I'm going to add 5, 6, and 7 all together, if that's okay with you,
Take
because
it
it's
away.
pretty much a rolling update.
Okay.
The ML&P closeout in particular, we have an October 25 deadline for the ML&P stipulation related to the Alaska Center for Treatment and the $15 million set aside. We are having meetings internally about making sure that we communicate with the Assembly what that plan is, what it looks like, and then potentially take some action before October of 2025 with a resolution or some agenda item before the body, so that there is official documentation that the stipulation has been dealt with appropriately. The FEMA and ARPA closeouts are going well. I think we have maybe 3 ARPA grants left to deal with, and they are all internal to the Muni. And so that is us trying to make sure that we spend the money for some projects within Parks and Rec and the Health Department. And I think we have some additional administrative funding, about $50,000 available for our contractors who are doing the administration on that. But right now it looks like we will meet our end of year deadline for spend, and everything with ARPA should be closed out on the spend side by the end of this year, and then on the reporting side in 2026. So that is, I mean, frankly, closing out nicely compared to the amount of work that has gone into that process over many years. And FEMA is in the same category. We are working through the earthquake closeout, but the COVID closeout you took action on in April, and seems to be going pretty well on all fronts there.
Questions from members? Okay. Thank you for that. I think next we will move on to new business, and we're going to hear an audit update.
All right, through the chair, this is Bill Falsey, the Chief Administrative Officer. I wanted to do a little bit of a set piece on where we are with the municipality's annual consolidated financial reports. And as I know we have some new members, I'll start a little bit at the beginning. Tell me how much time you'd like me to take. I think I can do this in 5 to 10 minutes. Otherwise, we'll just go through. Okay.
That's great.
So what is the annual comprehensive financial report, or the ACFR? It really is one or two, possibly even three documents. We publish an annual comprehensive financial report, which is about 200 pages long. It'll tell you all of our summary of liabilities and expenditures, where we are in our various funds. A detailed statement, which is another 200 pages, which will tell you all of the details based on our enterprise funds, our liability funds. If you want to learn more about all the different service areas we have, all of those are detailed there. There are some other interesting things in there if you really are looking for some bedtime reading, where you can read about our lane conditions, about the status of our retirement funds, etc. And then finally, there's a companion piece, sometimes called the SIFA, the single audit, which is how we comply with all of our state and federal grants. And so if you want to see all the different grants that we have received, that is a good one-stop shop. With that background, you will notice that all of them that I've put on the board are dated December 31st, 2022. And that is the last audited financials that the municipality has published. We should have more recent financials than that. And so part of the story that I want to socialize with everybody now is, where are we? How did we get here? And what happens next? In order to tell that story, I do want to provide some background as to how you create these documents. The municipality's finances are inherently complicated because we have all of these component units. So in order to get to the final 450 pages of ACFRs, first, you have to go through and do audited financials for our retirement system, our legacy retirement system, for ACDA, for a public transportation component, for Civic Ventures, the quasi-municipal nonprofit that oversees the Egan and the Denina Center, for the Performing Arts Center, which now does their own audited financials through an outsourced arrangement, for AWU, and for the port. And then finally for solid waste services. This is the table that shows where we are in the process right now. All of those components are done. So the last piece of the puzzle is the general government ACFR. So one part of this story is to say the audited financials are just inherently complex. The previous controller, Michael Cipriano, said that he had worked on ConocoPhillips annual consolidated financial reports. And he said ours were an order of magnitude more complex than ConocoPhillips globally, for whatever that's worth. So when you're doing this process, how long does it take to step through all of those pieces? If you started working on the audit on January 1st, and I will confess I don't actually know in what year, what date everybody started working on them in the previous years, this is how long it took to go from the date from January 1st to the day that the ACFR was actually delivered. So this is how we did from 2014 to 2021. You'll see there are a couple outliers there. In 2015, there was a delay because the state was slow to report some retirement contribution number that we couldn't get. 2017 was delayed because that was the year we turned on SAP, and that caused a whole lot of trauma in a lot of different places. But the reason I'm telling you this story now is 2022 took 554 days. It got issued on July 7th of last year, 1 week into this administration. And it put us in a deep hole. We would normally have started the ACFR for 2023 sometime around January 1st of 2024. Instead, we started in October. And we started in October because after July, August, September, we were still closing all of the periods of the previous financial year, which you have to do before you can start auditing them. So we knew we were walking into a challenge. Why did that happen? Why did it take 554 days? Well, part of the story is that the ACFRs mainly produced by the controller division. And I think folks know that in addition to doing all the monthly close and the general reconciliation of things and payments to vendors, in previous years, the controller division just completely collapsed. And you can tell that story a couple ways. But one is, today we have 19 budgeted positions. We have filled them all. But at one point, I'm told in prior years, they were down to 7. And in addition to losing lots of bodies, all of the institutional knowledge really walked out the door. And you can see that in a couple different ways. One is, if you look at the last audit that we produced, historically, we have very few audit findings. Your internal controls are good. Everything is being processed correctly. We had a record number of audit findings in the last 2022 audit. And in order to get it finally over the goal line, the overtime spigot was just completely open. So a couple things to say about this slide is, first, I would 100% anticipate that we are going to have a similar number or even more audit findings for the 2023 audit. And that is partly because normally you have a time to correct the audit findings. 2022's audit findings could not be corrected in 2023 because we didn't get that audit until 2024. So at least those 22 are still going to carry over, and we'll see what else we had. But second, the lived experience really has been that a lot of processes were broken when we showed up. And so we walked into the office and we knew we had a real challenge, and it was not just a people challenge, it was also a process challenge. And where are we now? What I think you guys care about, are we finished? No, we are not finished, but we do think we're pretty close. The big piece of the puzzle, the last piece of the puzzle for the ACFR, is the actual ACFR draft itself. We've exchanged multiple drafts with our auditors, BDO, and a grants schedule. And the grants schedule is inherently very complex, but also became uniquely very complex in the last few years because we had a tremendous amount of FEMA money from earthquake and COVID, and CARES Act ARPA dollars that the municipality, somewhat uniquely across jurisdictions, didn't just eat all that money to backshore our finances. We pushed it out into the community, and we didn't push it out to the community in the form of United Way or NeighborWorks. You give this money out to lots of recipients. We personally gave it out to dozens of recipients, and that, unbeknownst to us at the time, caused a tremendous accounting problem on the back end, or not problem, but at least a huge additional workload. So the grant schedule is hard. And last year, my understanding is that we sort of ended up in a little bit of an infinite do loop where we would bring them a grant schedule, our auditors would say it's not quite right, and we just had real trouble getting it finished. We have transmitted 2 versions of the grant schedule to the auditors. I will hear tomorrow on how we're doing. I'm hopeful that we are not going to get caught in the infinite do loop, but I've put this slide on the board to tell you that we really do need to have this done by August 10th, because why do you do this exercise at all? You do this exercise at all because it's the right thing to do. The municipality needs to know where its money is. That's number one. You guys care about this exercise because at the end of the day, the audited financials also tell you how you ended the year, what your fund balance is. If we only spent 97% of the budget, that means there's 3% that potentially could be spent this year. And we, municipality writ large, in the last several years has not been able to tell the assembly how we ended 23 or how we ended 24. So there is potentially a fund balance that's available to you. Bond ratings, in order to have credible bond ratings, the rating agencies need you to show not just that you say that you have all the money in the bank, which we do, but that you can prove it with audited financials. And then fourth, and finally, the reason we get to this slide, the municipality does not have third-party insurance for workers' compensation. We're self-insured, and that's fine. We have all the money in the bank. We pay all of our claims. We have no problem paying those claims. But state statute says in order to be a self-insured provider of workers' compensation, you must remit to the state your audited financials. And we do not have the audited financials to give them. So we're about to crash into a hearing before the Workers' Compensation Board, where they will say, where are your audited financials? We're supposed to send our paperwork to them on August 10th. I'm still hopeful that we will be able to moot out this hearing by giving them our audited financials on August 10th. But I can't guarantee that we will be at this, from what I know right now. And if we are unable to do that, there are potentially some very significant consequences. One could be that we simply just have to go to market and procure third parties worker compensation insurance that we really don't need. That will be very expensive. The other is there are certain ways in which the statutes on the books prescribe penalties, which when you just do the math could be sort of catastrophic for an employer of our size. Hopefully we'd be able to avoid all that. And I'm, again, hoping that none of that comes to pass because we'll be able to get this over the goal line before we're all said and done. All of this not only tees up the immediate issue of how we get through August 10th and August 19th, how do we get out of this hole that we're in? And so I wanted to just give you some scenarios with a couple different punchlines. How do we get out of this? Well, one is if we just kept on regular order and we kept turning in ACFRs 554 days, we would never get out of it. We would spiral further and further away from the sun and eventually leave the solar system. So we couldn't do that. So if we had a people problem and a process problem, we were attacking that, and we had to get out of increasing delay and no recovery ever. We have fully staffed the department. We are making process improvements. We're rapidly closing. We're closing periods of the previous year more quickly, and I feel like we are automating things. We're making things work again. If we deliver the ACFR sometime around now, sometime before August 1st, then we will have finished in 300 and something days. And that does to me feel like a minor miracle from where we started. And if we make minor incremental progress, then the first punch I want to give you is we do recover eventually. We get out of the hole, but this is untenable. We have to do better than this, because in the meantime, we're going to be stuck in these conversations with the Workers' Compensation Board and with the rating agencies. So doing a little bit better than what we have done so far isn't going to get us there. If we just go back to recent years before the 554-day delivery, that took 272 days to go from January 1st to the day that it was finished. There we slightly more comfortably recover. We do recover. So that's the punchline I first want to give you, that we will get out of this hole one way or the other before, in our lifetimes, and before too much longer. If we do 272 days, then we start just a little bit late in 2027. We deliver basically in the normal order of things in 2027, and then we're back to the full regular recovery in 2028. But we want to do better than all of that. And so I will tell you that we internally are aiming, after we get through the trauma of finishing this audit, to say, let's go back to when we were actually really good at this and build in a little bit of a cushion for us to step down. If we can do 252 days, then we would start in August. We'd finish in the first quarter of next year. Then we'd start again in the first quarter of next year. We'd deliver in October, and we could actually recover next year. This is the prize that we have our eyes on. I would love to get this story behind us. This is supposed to be boring and useful, but boring and not a big thing that could turn into something on the front of the newspaper. So if this is closer to where we're aiming, finishing 250 days than 200 days, is that even plausible? And I think the answer is yes, because I know the people we've got working for us now. I know the processes we're putting in place, but history tells me that it should be. After SAP, before 2020, we had those kind of timelines in place, and we are boiling off some of the complexity of the future audits by closing emergencies, by trying to wrestle the FEMA story a little bit to the ground. That's the target, and I wanted to make sure the Assembly knew all of that. And then hopefully that all means that I can answer the question, which is actually on the Assembly agenda: what's the fund balance from 2023? Hopefully I can tell you in August.
Okay, questions from members? Looks like Mr. Gerker.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Falsey. Are there any state or federal grants or funding that's in jeopardy by us not having this done yet?
I don't, to Member Gerker, I can't tell you chapter and verse. I know that I have seen that we certainly do have obligations under our state and federal grants to report back audited financials. That's why we do the single audit. I've seen some email traffic where some of the HUD money that the health department is receiving, we've already received the emails you would expect. Where are the financials that you were supposed to have sent to us? I don't know that there's any clawback provisions. And from where I am sitting now, what I'm most worried about is the workers' compensation piece. I have not heard anyone show up to me with their hair on fire saying money gets clawed back or we lose the ability to receive it going forward in the grants context.
Question on the phone from Mr. Constant.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. So in the unlikely event there is a negative fund balance from 2023 or 2024, what do we do? What are we going to see?
Through the chair to Member Constant. All right, let me say a few remarks about fund balance. So in typical years, the way you would think about it is just you were budgeted this amount of money. How much did you spend? What's left over? You can carry that over to next year. We believe that in the last several years, because of the vacancies in the municipality, there should have been, in that story, pretty real amounts of fund balance from those years that would be left over to spend. There is an overlay wrinkle that I don't know how much has been talked about yet, which is that there was an accounting change related to the way we funded SAP. For years, as I understand it, and I'm getting a little bit dangerous and on the end of my limb here, we accounted for that as a short-term liability that didn't affect the fund balance calculation. The auditors in last year's finance, as I understand it, and actually Mr. Thurn probably could give us chapter and verse on this, told us we had to recharacterize it, and it's a long-term liability. And that hits fund balance. And further, that's a complication because when we paid for the cost of SAP using a master lease, which is a borrowing instrument, if we said that we would pay off the third-party bank or whatever the financial institution was, as I recall, over 10 years. But we would recover the cost of the project from the departments over 5 years, or 15 years rather. So in 15 years, the whole thing washes out. It's a zero. But it meant that because the recovery timeline was not married to the payment timeline, there are years where that debt is big on an annual basis, and then it comes back. All of that is rolling up to say, Chair Constant, there should be fund balance if you put the blinders on and look just at what happened in the calendar year. But if this accounting issue related to SAP means that there is an additional factor in the calculations, it's possible that there's no available fund balance until that story boils itself completely off. Again, those are details that we'll be able to tell you with much greater particularity, hopefully in August, in a few weeks, as we get the financials for 2023 out the door.
Right, and I will say I concur. I anticipate there will be a positive fund balance because of the staffing issues and all that business. I think that's the most logical situation. However, I want us to be mentally prepared should the other occur.
All right, Ms. Baldwin-Day with a question.
Yeah, curious how this impacts our bond rating, if at all.
Through the chair to member Baldwin-Day, we just were re-rated by Fitch. And so there was a press release that went out from Fitch that said our bond rating is reaffirmed at AA, our outlook is switched to negative. And the reason it switched to negative is because the municipality has not published its audited financials in a long time and still hasn't published them for 2023. Now, if we can't recover from this, if we keep spiraling out of control, eventually the rating agencies say, I'm not even comfortable rating you. In which case, when we sell general obligation bonds or revenue bonds in the future, the market looks at them way more skeptically, and either they're not marketable at all, or they're very expensive because they don't have a rating with them anymore. So the current answer is, so far it hasn't materially affected our bond rating. If we don't fix it, it certainly will. Again, I'm hoping that we never go over that waterfall.
All right, any other questions? Okay, thank you for
One
that.
note,
Oh, go ahead, Mr. Constant.
August, when we
Say that one more time. You broke up a little bit.
said I'm ready to have a party when all that's done in August.
Yes. With those fund balance funds. Just kidding.
One other thing that I will say on fund balance, if I could do one more item, is that for a very long time, the other thing that was affecting fund balance was the earthquake and COVID, because fund balance also is affected by what you may have heard as the 10 and the 2, where we have represented to our bond rating agencies that we have a bond reserve policy that says we will keep in reserve cash in the bank, 10% of the expenditures from last year plus 2 as a kind of emergency reserve. And we needed the emergency reserve in the earthquake and COVID, and we spent into it. So we needed a plan to backfill those funds. And that was a big topic of public conversation for a long time about whether we were ever going to get FEMA recovery. As you heard in this last budget season, we got something like 99% of the money back. And then we collected the very last pieces from taxpayers in this last levy. And I'll say Alden Thurn deserves a lot of credit there. There were a lot of voices at the time said, you've ruined it. We will never recover this money. And we did.
There's hope. Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Our final item under new business, Member Brawley, my co-chair, and I wanted to show you, our colleagues, sort of what we've done in the past to communicate our budget priorities to the administration in advance of their 120-day memo. And that's been done a couple different ways. So you'll have in your materials here, in 2024, that was communicated via a letter from the budget co-chairs. In 2023, it was communicated via resolution of the entire assembly. And I think that that's sort of the way that we'd like to go this time around, just so we have something that's formally expressing the will of the entire body. So take a look at those, and in advance of the meeting on the 25th, the work session that we'll have a conversation about, sort of an early conversation about what some of those budget priorities are. And then very likely Member Brawley and I will be putting together a resolution, and that will come before you. So just kind of for your awareness. Questions on that? Great. Okay, and then we will move on. I don't think we have any discussion today about committee legislative and budget priorities. And so we'll just move to audience participation. Is there anyone in the audience who wants to participate today? I'm not seeing any. Fantastic. And so with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, and do we have a second? We're adjourned.
Muted.